It's not every day you get to visit a landmark in the brewing industry. We're going inside Russian River to talk to the legend himself, Vinnie. You're gonna share 5 recipes, how to brew them, tips to brewing them.
I knew on my first brew, like, this is what I was gonna do for the rest of my life. You can make really good beer on mediocre equipment.
Let's go back to double IPA, because you're the inventor of that style, right? Double IPA, you've been...
So they say.
That's what you've been dubbed, so.
I think the Pliny the Younger event, there's almost nothing like it, that for 2 weeks in a year, that a brewery has a line for that whole 2 weeks for a special release, and now 2 locations.
Vinnie, thanks for sitting down with me, letting us come in, interview. I want to start, I know you're a pretty humble guy, but I want to start with some pageantries and just kind of like how much I respect you, and I think the whole entire beer community does. You know, I was going to lean into our Italian names and have some cool Italian word, but I'm a skater kid from San Francisco and I don't know any Italian. So I'm going to go with, I think, something we both love, Belgian beers. But you guys are kind of the grand crew of breweries as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
So just want to,
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate the kind words.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
So let's go, you guys, you released a video of your history and all that, and I think it's great, and we'll link it in our video, and I encourage everybody to go look at that. So I won't dig into all those, but there's some stuff you said in there I'd love to get into.
Sure.
And let's start with your homebrewing roots.
Yeah.
So you started homebrewing in 1989?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, in Southern California. I was living in San Diego, and I had a couple roommates, Dennis and Steve. Dennis is actually still in the beer business. He has a little place called Fathom Bistro. It's down on Shelter Island, actually on the pier. Back then we started homebrewing together in '89. Yeah, I lived in San Diego and would go to this funny little homebrew shop out in El Cajon. El Cajon is a suburb in East San Diego County.
Yeah.
And it's kind of where you live if you're going to commute into San Diego, but you want your cost of living to be a little bit less.
Yeah.
There was this little homebrew shop called Beer and Winecraft.
Okay.
So they sold beer and.
Yeah.
And Owen and Audrey were this older couple that owned it and ran it, and that was the only shop there was down there. We think of San Diego as this amazing beer scene, but at the time there was only 3 breweries in San Diego.
Oh, wow.
Karl Strauss, Pizza Port had their original location, and then there was Callahan's, which was this little Irish pub making their own beer in a strip mall in Mira Mesa.
Okay.
Not far from where White Labs is.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And this was the one and only homebrew shop, and the homebrew club Quaff.
Oh, Quaff, very familiar with it.
Yeah, was around in its early infancy days, and Dennis and I would go out there and just geek out,
That's awesome.
as homebrewers do in homebrew shops.
I think let's stick on homebrew shops for a second here, and I think to me, it's kind of the hub of the community. And I talked to Homer at Oak Barrel. He talked about the homebrew scene in the 60s, talked to Ken at Sierra Nevada, and he talked about the homebrew scene in the 70s. So tell me a little bit about the homebrew scene in the 80s.
Yeah, so as a homebrewer, there was no buying a full sculpture like, MoreBeer sells, and like we have, one of their, homebrew kit, stainless steel, single level that we still use on occasion. We did extract, just like most homebrewers do, but within a couple brews, we had switched to all grain.
Okay.
And I knew on my first brew, this is what I was going to do for the rest of my life. I definitely knew that.
You said that in the video. I thought that was interesting to me. Instantly hooked?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we, did the old classic 2 6-gallon buckets inside of each other with the inside bucket.
That was your mash tun and false bottom.
That was our false bottom. And we went to the thrift store and bought an old turkey cooker. It's kind of this rectangular thing that you could imagine. It's like a rectangle crock pot. Is the best way to think of it, and a lid.
Yeah.
And that was our mash tun, and it was big enough that you could have enough grain in there for a 5-gallon batch, and then we would dump it into the false bottom 2-bucket system, and the outside one has the spigot, and then that ran, through down into a kettle, which, however, initially we were boiling on a kitchen stove.
Okay.
Later on I bought a, camp cooking.
Yeah, moved outside, got some more power.
Yeah, exactly. And, as you do as homebrewers.
Yeah.
But, and the process went from there. We fermented in carboys. Yes, you could buy kegs to keg into, but we were bottling a lot of early beers. And then ingredients, there was basic two-row pale malt, some stuff from England, crystal malt, 15, 40, maybe 60 or 70, and then something really dark, really basic dark malts, chocolate, roasted barley, and back then would be called black patent.
Oh, black patent. Okay, yeah.
And now I think we just call it black malt.
Yeah.
There was no dehusked Carafa from
3
Wireman
or whatever.
Dehusked from Dingemans like we use sometimes, or there wasn't a huge selection, but there was enough to do what you needed to do. I think hops is where it was really. That's where it was really different than how it is now.
A lot narrower selection, I'd imagine.
No private hops, so no Amarillo, no Simcoe, no Citra, no Mosaic, no Eldorado, no Sabro, no Talus. I mean, I could go on and on with all the private hops that are owned by hop companies or growers. Back in the homebrew days, we would be using Galena, Chinook, and Nugget. That would be our bittering hops.
Okay.
And then a lot of Cascade, of course. I would definitely use Chinook in the finish as well, which at the time wasn't normal. In the homebrewing back then, all of the teaching was that it was very old school, like high alpha for bittering and low and mid alpha for
the aroma,
mid-boil finish and potentially dry hop. But you wouldn't add Chinook to dry hop in a conventional. There weren't any old homebrew books talking about using like Chinook as an example, yet it has such a beautiful aroma. And I can remember being at like a quaff meeting or something, or talking to other homebrewers and pouring them my IPA years later where I dry hopped with Chinook, and they're like, you're not supposed to dry hop with Chinook.
What was the yeast like at the time?
It was all dry yeast when I started homebrewing. And it wasn't great dry yeast like it
was more
now.
coming from bread making, right?
Yeah,
Probably,
so you had Red Star.
Yeah.
You did have Whitbread.
Okay.
You could get Whitbread dry yeast, which was English.
Yeah.
And then eventually Y yeast became available.
Okay.
And because they came before White.
Before White Labs,
And then that was one of the things that I would purchase from Homebrew Mart, and was that Chris White was selling yeast. White Labs didn't exist yet, so he was selling yeast to Homebrew Mart as in homebrew packs. He was selling yeast to Pizza Port, the original spot in Solana Beach, and then eventually, when I opened Blind Pig Brewery in 1994 in Temecula, I started buying yeast from him, and I was his third customer. Blind Pig. This is before White Labs.
Yeah,
so he's just doing.
He was
this
just building the brand.
He was doing this out of the lab at UCSD.
Okay.
University of California, San Diego.
As a side hustle,
in
or
La Jolla, and as a side hustle, and he was getting his degree in whatever. But for the longest time, it was the funniest thing. I would call him and say, "Hey, Chris, I need." However much yeast to do a starter for a 7-barrel batch at Blind Pig. And then he'd be like, okay, I'll call you when it's ready. He'd call, and I'd drive down in my old Toyota pickup, and he was really busy, and I was busy. So it was just a quick exchange, and it probably looked really bad from afar, but I would get to the mobile gas station and call him, because it was before cell phones. I'd call him, because it was just below and up the hill was the school. I'd say, okay, I'll like 5 minutes, and I'd drive up the hill, and he'd come out, and he'd hand me a bag that had the yeast in it. I'd hand him a wad of cash. Probably looked like a drug deal from afar.
Yeah.
I'd shove it into my ice chest, and I'd give him a little beer.
Yeah.
And then I'd drive off because I was too busy, and he was busy getting his degree. And the big thing, which I think gets lost now, is what made White so unique was that his yeast pitches to homebrewers and breweries were pitchable quantities. You didn't have to grow them up. Where there's no knock on Y yeast, but you had to propagate up your Y yeast pitch yourself, and we certainly didn't have that capability at Blind Pig. So long story short, that was a big revelation. Was to be able to have pitchable quantities for homebrewing and on the commercial scale once they went commercial.
Before we move past homebrew, one last thing you mentioned, Homebrew Club. I'm a member of Doe's. Tasty was a member of Doe's. Yep. It means a lot to me, the homebrew clubs. Quaff. So were you a member of Quaff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Club was a great place to learn, especially as a new homebrewer. We'd go to all the meetings and take our crazy beers that we'd make, and you get great feedback. And so Quaff had been formed shortly before that. We certainly weren't there for the beginning of it. Just that whole time for me in brewing was this, like, I was a sponge to learn anything about beer, reading the Michael Jackson's books on, his World Guide to Beer, whatever that book was called, and
so Palmer probably that book wasn't even out yet.
Oh no, yeah, it was the book that we learned from was Charlie Papazian's Joy of Homebrewing.
Joy of Homebrewing, yeah.
And then eventually he came out with New Complete Joy of Homebrewing, which was basically the next version of it, and he just kept updating it. That was the only book there was. Up this way in Sonoma County, where we're at now, you had Byron Birch and Nancy Vineyard with their homebrew shop, and Byron had a little book that he had written as well, and somewhere along the way I got my hands on that, but that was pretty basic and not near as much information as Charlie's book, and so we lived in that book, and Palmer's book didn't come around for
it was late 90s, early 2000s.
It was a good decade plus later. That and I know that's kind of become the standard. Yeah. But in the day, Charlie Papazian's Complete Joy of Homebrewing was the book, and everybody in the club used that. And then eventually, I moved back to Temecula, where I grew up. My parents had a winery there, and they needed help back at the winery, and so I started. Sometimes going up to meetings to the Maltos Falcons in LA.
Yeah. I think they're the oldest
homebrew club in America.
In America, yeah.
And still a really active club. And that was great because they had some really advanced homebrewers. And I hadn't gone professional yet. And then eventually I helped start a club in Temecula, the Temecula Valley Homebrew Club.
Okay.
And then in that time, I helped start the Southern California Homebrewers Festival.
Oh yeah,
which is now still going, and it's
it was a couple of weeks ago.
30 years. I think it's like 30-something years now, minus whatever happened in the pandemic. But the first 5 years of the Southern California Homebrewers Festival was actually on my family's winery property. So
it was
like
cool.
this like homebrew root, a Woodstock kind of feeling, and everyone would camp around the lake. And then all the clubs would have a booth, and there was a couple clubs at that point in San Diego, a couple in Orange County. You had the Maltos Falcons. That was really a hub of home brewing in Southern California, and really proud that I was able to help start it. And honestly, it just got too big.
Yeah,
and it got to the point where it was like 800 people, 600, 800 people, and it was like, it can't be here anymore.
Too much.
It's too much.
Just from like liability standpoint.
So my favorite thing, I remember the Maltos Falcons would always have, and probably still do, if you presented a beer at the SoCal Homebrew Fest, they always had the recipe posted, and they would turn the kegs. They had this very elaborate bar. And they had a little slot that the recipe would go in, or the basics of it at least. And that to me was my favorite part of the SoCal Homebrew Fest, was that you could go talk to the brewer and you could get ideas and get a recipe. And everyone was like, good to just give the information, classic homebrewing. So.
You mentioned Blind Pig. Let's start there. So 1993, you started Blind
94.
Pig? 94.
We started, I started thinking about opening a brewery in 93 and did it in 94. I had a homebrew friend in Temecula who was part of the homebrew club in Temecula, Bill Bird, and Bill said, hey, I have this acquaintance in Bisbee, Arizona. We should take a road trip and go there and brew. He's got a little 7-barrel system. He built it himself. I'd love to help you, with your dream and get this brewery open. So Bill and I took a road trip and went and brewed with Electric Dave. Dave Harvan.
Cool name, Electric Dave.
And in Bisbee, everyone kind of had their own trade, and he was an electrician. So that
that's right. I was going to ask you where they came from.
There was like Neon Bob who did neon signs, and Plumber or whatever. Anyways, so went and brewed with him. He had this system. He cobbled together. All his fermenters were plastic. Every type of Grundy tank. Grundy is an old English.
Oh yeah, I know the Grundys. Yeah.
Pressurized vessel that almost always leaked. Anyways, went and brewed. It was really inspiring. And then a year later, the brewery ended up closing, and I ended up buying the equipment from him. And
so that was the equipment that started Blind Pig. Okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Dave went to jail for selling marijuana mail order. And
mail order.
True story.
Yeah.
Now you probably couldn't.
He's ahead of his time.
Yeah. And so, anyways, I bought the equipment from him while he was in the Arizona penitentiary, and I would correspond with him by mail. I'd get these letters from inmate number, blah blah blah. I wish I would have kept those.
Yeah, that's kind of cool story.
Yeah, there were bumper stickers, free electric Dave.
Yeah,
you know, like come on, he was only selling marijuana.
Yeah.
But anyways, I bought his equipment, and that's what I opened Blind Pig with in '94.
Okay.
The kettle. The boiling kettle was an old soup vessel from a nearby military base.
Direct fire then? Or?
Yeah, direct fire.
Okay.
Dave's direct fire was he had about 6 elements all plumbed together from a bunch of old hot water heaters. That's how he heated his.
Oh, wow.
I ended up buying kind of a flamethrower.
Yeah.
Bill and I lined the inside of the base of the kettle, the firebox, with basically fire bricks they'd used for a fireplace.
Okay.
And then built a little stack in the middle so that the flame would come up and hit. And then boil.
So you're
the
not getting all the caramelization or as much. You're doing the best to try and keep that away. Yeah.
And the mash tun was hand built. All the fermenters were plastic, and then we had all these different Grundy types. We had every type of Grundy tank possible: top entry, bottom entry, bolt, giant clamp, submarine door type. They all had pressure valves and stuff, so they were safe. But they always leaked. They were always topping them up with CO2.
Okay.
And early on, the first beer was a double IPA, and that was, I took my homebrew recipe, and I didn't know how to scale it up, so I called Vince Marsaglia. Vince and his sister Gina owned Pizza Port in San Diego. At the time, they just had their one spot, and I was a customer there. I'd go down there and hang out and just get inspired by what they had done. And so he gave me the recipe for Swami's. He knew I wasn't going to just copy it. Yeah. I used it as a guide to extrapolate my recipe up. And so, first beer we made was a double IPA instead of our regular IPA, with the idea that, we make a bigger beer, more hops, basically, in all honesty, cover up any flaws as long as it wasn't contaminated.
Yeah.
And but I ended up deciding to age it for a year and continue to dry hop it. So I got multiple dry hops.
Oh, interesting.
And we aged on oak chips, which we can talk about why I use oak chips.
That answers a question I'm going to ask you later. Yeah.
And it ended up aging for a year, and it was all based on Ballantine IPA. Ballantine, which is an old throwback IPA, really the original IPA in America. They had this reserve version of Ballantine IPA that they would age for an extended time on oak. Mm-hmm. Turns out, I think the oak barrels were pitched, so you probably didn't get any oak flavor, which at the time I didn't know.
Gotcha.
But still, oak became a part of not only that inaugural ale, which is what we called that first double IPA in '94, but regular Blind Pig IPA got dry hopped with pellets, Cascade, Centennial, eventually the Columbus, and then we would put, and those would be pellets and whole cone, and then we would do bags of oak chips and put them in the tank, and they would get it. So it picked up this kind of tannic quality, and it was a part of the dryness of the beer on the palate.
That makes sense, yeah.
And you would get a little bit in the aroma, but it wasn't enough to be overpowering over the hops.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. That's interesting. I'm glad you said that. Let's go back to double IPA because you're the inventor of that style, right? Double IPA. You've been.
So they say.
That's what you've been dubbed. So that first beer, you didn't intend for it to be double, or you did?
I did.
You wanted more hops, more alcohol.
Yeah, we doubled
doubled
the hops, raised the malt up. We weren't using sugar. That was all 100%
no dextrose.
Malt, no dextrose. And that was probably mostly based on, I kept reading stuff from Fritz Maytag at Anchor saying, we don't use sugar. The English brewers, I think he was referring to English brewers sometimes using sugar in the past, and how he wanted to be all malt. And I was very much inspired and influenced by Fritz and Ken Grossman, and from Sierra, of course. And so I didn't, back then, it was all malt. The finishing gravity was quite a bit higher than what I would do today, so on and so forth.
Would you call it a double IPA then?
Yeah, I called it a double IPA.
Okay.
Yeah,
so you came up with the name too.
We still had, we didn't call it Imperial.
Because there's that whole nomenclature is Imperial, meaning...
Which it goes, people say use both, but I always said double because we had doubled the hops.
Gotcha.
So,
okay.
and it made more sense.
Yeah.
To me at least, but Imperial works too, and honestly, it doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah. You won some awards at Blind Pig, right?
We did, yeah. In '96, we had won a gold medal with our ESB, so it was a classic English style ESB, and then we had a silver medal with our Blind Pig, which I learned after the fact that the judges couldn't decide. So they flipped a coin on who was going to win. So we ended up getting the silver, and someone else got the gold.
Down to a coin flip.
But it was, you know, it was a feather in the cap that like
Yeah.
our beer was. It was that good, and it made it that far. And those beers were made in plastic fermenters on a commercial level.
Wow.
And so yeah, that was really cool. I remember after that, George Fix writing a post about this little brewery in Temecula winning awards at GABF with plastic fermenters, and that hey, you know, at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be the best equipment. You can make great beer on mediocre equipment so long as you do your process right and you clean and all those things.
Cleaning and sanitizing. The first day I used to teach classes at MoreBeer, their showroom, and I'd always, you know, do you like washing dishes? Do you like cleaning? Because that's really what it's about. Yeah. So 3 breweries: Blind Pig.
Yep.
Corbel Russian River.
Yep, the original.
And then Russian River now too. We have we're building. MoreBeer has a pro division. We're building MoreBeer Pro. So we've done a lot of interviews of like people going pro, and we've got videos out there. And so, what's one thing you've learned at each one of those steps that you'd share with any homebrewers that are looking to go pro or pro brewers right now? Love to hear that.
I think at Blind Pig, probably just what George Fix had said in this post years ago, that you can make really good beer on mediocre equipment. You don't need the absolute best equipment, and I think, you know, we're at a point, you know, we're in mid 2024 right now. There's a lot of breweries closing right now. There's every week I get a new alert from some auction company that, you know, it's not just one brew house or complete brewery, it's 3 or 4 in one email. So there's a lot of breweries that bought brand new equipment and just went all in, and now we're seeing the result of that the market softened, and unfortunately at the expense of a lot of these breweries that had this dream of opening, you know, their brewery, but now they're closing. And, you know, I sometimes wonder if a lot of the breweries that are open now didn't quite go through the suffering, the pain and suffering that I know Ken Grossman went through, that Natalie and I went through, you know, the years of not paying ourselves and starting with cobbled together equipment like we did. But not only does it build character, but it also, you're not in so deep on the financial side. And so, you know, I think that's what I learned at Blind Pig. But then transitioning to Corbel, where Russian River started in Russian River Brewery started in 1997, is that, wow, how easy it is to make great beer with great equipment, and how equipment does help you make better beer because you can sanitize and clean more easily. You know, I went from plastic fermenters to stainless copper clad, floor to wall tile, easy to clean. And so yeah, I did transition from used equipment to brand new equipment, and it was easier to clean. I had more confidence in my brewing and that sort of thing. But that doesn't take away from the amazing beer that we made at Blind Pig. And so, so having good equipment does make brewing easy, but you have to make sure that you're financially in a good spot. And it might be that a brewery opens and there's no used equipment, but you can sure save a lot of money with used equipment, and then graduate up to a nicer brew house that's you buy new, that you can design yourself. And we just replaced our brew house in Santa Rosa, old 20-barrel brew house, for a new one, and that was my 10th or 11th brewery project that I've been a part of a brew house swap out or brand new brewery. And so I've done a lot of them over the years. And you know, in 30 years in brewing, I've installed 10 or 11 brew houses. And some of those were complete breweries, and learned a lot along the way. You know, at Korbel and transitioning into Russian River when Natalie and I took it over, I think you could cover this topic for both. One of the most important things, kind of going back to your question, was ingredients. Was really like, when I had Blind Pig, I'd pick up the phone and I'd call Hop Union and say, hey, I need a box of Cascade, a box of Centennial, a box of Chinook, or whatever, Mount Hood, and they'd send it. There were no contracts, or you know. And one cool thing at Blind Pig, though, was that I could. Great Western Malting had a malt house in Los Angeles, in the City of Commerce. So every Wednesday, you could go as a home brewer, professional brewer, and fill. We had these big giant cardboard drums, and it's Southern California, so it never rains. So I just throw them in the back of my truck and drive down there and pick up bulk grain, but they would sell it to you at silo price instead of bag price. It was a huge savings. And so I would do that as a home brewer, but I would keep doing it as a professional brewer. Every Wednesday morning, I'd get up at like 4 in the morning, drive to LA, and then get there, load it. So I got to see, I took a tour once of the malt house there. It was pretty cool, you know, as a young brewer. But anyway, so I knew like importance of ingredients and stuff, but it wasn't until getting to Russian River that really started focusing on hops and malt and the quality, and meeting maltsters and meeting hop growers and the representatives from the hop brokers like Hop Union and Yakima Chief. And there was an English hop company called Morris Hamberry that we bought our English hops from. Didn't even exist anymore. But in 2010, we helped start a nonprofit with 7 other breweries called the Hop Quality Group. And it was us, Sierra Nevada, Firestone, New Belgium, New Glarus, Boston Beer, I think Deschutes, maybe one other brewery that I'm missing. Anyways, we started this nonprofit, and Bell's, and we started this nonprofit. And the idea was to create this conduit from the growers to the brewers, because at the time there wasn't a lot of interaction. There was not a lot of interaction between brewers and growers, hop growers.
You just got what you got.
And didn't have any feedback. Everything was through a broker. And in a lot of cases, a broker didn't even want you talking to them, because they thought you would just skip the broker. And in some cases we do buy direct, but we still buy a lot of our hops through brokers. So anyways, this organization ended up being like a real milestone for the industry, because it brought the kiln temperature down on hops, and that would not have happened if it weren't for
opens
the
up
hop
the
quality
aroma
group.
then,
and you know, and some things, hop creep became worse because of that, but that's another story. But anyways, it did open up like farm tours and farm audits, cleaning up, you know, farms that maybe didn't have the best sanitation. You know, and our pitch was, hey, we're not just adding hops to the hot side. As a craft brewer and IPA is growing, we're adding your raw hops, whether they're whole cone or pellet, we're adding them to beer that's been finished. And so we need a clean facility. They need to be, you know, clean, so on and so forth.
You started getting them to adhere to standards.
Yeah. Now the Hop Quality Group has like 60 brewery members, and
I think
Natalie and I have now stepped back from like a management role. We were the treasurers for the whole time up until 2022, and eventually got to the point where there was enough foundational help to run the organization by the members that we just opened it up. But yeah, again, at the time it was just slow growth, just like our business model in beer.
Yeah, well, that's a great approach.
Yeah.
All right, Vinnie, this is kind of special. We're doing this video here, but I'm also gonna write an article for Brew Your Own magazine, where you're gonna share 5 recipes, how to brew them, tips to brewing them. If you wanna brew them yourself at home, BYO article coming out later this year, so look out for that. But the first one I wanna start with, Blind Pig. We kind of know where the name started with now. I wanna tell you how I was exposed to Blind Pig, because it was kind of a cool story. Tasty, Mike McDowell, friend of ours. I was a member of Homebrew Club. Everybody, Pliny, everybody's going crazy for Pliny. Everybody wants Pliny. I wanted Pliny as myself as well. The first time I had Younger was with Tasty, but then when we'd go out to bottle shops or drinking and stuff like that, he'd always order Blind Pig. And he's like, for my money, Blind Pig's better than Pliny. Not to take anything away from Pliny, but it was his favorite beer. So I'd like to start there. Maybe tell me how special it is to you, then we'll go from there.
Yeah, and Mike also had this Pliny light recipe that was probably more like Blind Pig that he would homebrew.
I remember that one,
yeah, for sure. I remember bringing that going. That's really good.
Yeah.
That's probably the best Pliny clone I'd ever had, even though it wasn't 8% alcohol.
Yeah.
But I loved his mindset, because I always, when we published the Pliny the Elder recipe originally, the idea was that that it was a springboard, it was a starting point, and that's exactly how Mike took it. So, but yeah, Blind Pig. So, the Blind Pig we talked about earlier from Temecula, that was what I call the original Blind Pig recipe. And now, kind of the more modern version, if you will, is still a lot of the same hops: Chinook, Cascade, Centennial, but we have taken liberties and added in Amarillo. So there's a good amount of Amarillo in it. I think Amarillo is an amazing all-purpose IPA hop, and then it does have just a little bit of Simcoe in it right now as well. And the Simcoe is less relevant in this beer than it is in Pliny, where Pliny it's the main hop. The beer is still 6.25% alcohol. It's not as bitter as it was back in the day, but it has held the same 60 to 65 BUs ever since we started brewing it again in 2004 through Russian River Brewing Company. It's changed a little bit in that it doesn't have any crystal malt in it anymore.
Okay.
That was something that we whittled it down little by little, and then we switched from crystal malt to Munich 30, which is there's not like maybe one or two vendors that have that, but just as a transition. And then eventually, we started testing it without the Munich 30, and we liked it just as good. So it still has a little bit of Simpson Best Pale in it, just for body and mouthfeel, and then a little bit of dextrin malt, so Carapils or something similar for body.
I love that Simpson, that English malt.
Yeah,
that's a great one.
Yeah, I like Simpson as a way to add body and mouthfeel to a beer without going to like Maris Otter, which gets to be, for me personally, too bready and too biscuity, whereas the Simpson Best Pale is just this, it has a fullness to it, but it's really clean.
And that's the one question I was going to ask you, but we answered it earlier. Of MoreBeer has a Blind Pig kit, and I remember brewing that, and there's wood chips in there, and, and then I have the commercial. I'm like, is he really doing that? But you answered my question of why the wood chips are in that recipe.
Yeah, it was based on the original recipe, and we still brew inaugural ale every once in a while. Natalie and I have done it twice on the Pilot Brewery, which is that original double IPA from Blind Pig that has oak chips on it. But yeah, it was based on kind of this thought I had, Ballantine was aged in oak sometimes, but as I learned later, it was pitched barrels, but still kind of a cool part of the recipe and different from here. And this is definitely classic, dry, crisp, finishes at 2.3 to 2.5 Plato. And I really love IPAs that finish it at that range. Anything lower than that, to me, is too dry. Anything higher than that, you're getting a little bit sweet.
Yeah, I have to agree with Mike that love this beer. Amazing. Anybody who wants to brew the classic, go to morebeer.com. We've got that recipe. Anybody who wants to brew the modern one, get ready to check out the BYO article. All right, so the next beer, let's talk about, probably is the world's best IPA for many years, right? And one of the best beers I've ever tasted. I love this beer. MoreBeer has a kit again, but you will share the most updated, because I assume this is something you iterate too on.
I've always considered all of our beers to be more concepts than they are a hard recipe. You come across a new hop, and it's like, hey, well, let's fit in. Let's do some testing on the Pilot Brewery. If it works, maybe it's a better fit than one of the hops that are in, say, Pliny right now. But there is a through line with Pliny, and that's that Simcoe has always been the main hop in it, and Amarillo has been the second hop to that. Everything else around that has changed and adjusted over the years. And it's something that I think has kept our beers relevant still, that if you stick with the exact same recipe that you did 10, 20 years ago, if you're lucky to be in business that long, you're not being relevant to the current consumers, taste and whatnot. And for that, yes, we have made tweaks along the way. Again, like Blind Pig IPA, it no longer has any crystal malt in it. Pliny used to have some dextrin malt that is no longer in the recipe. We still use sugar though, some dextrose sugar to help dry it out, also reduce the malt load in it. For certain reasons we do that, but it is still 8% alcohol. I think the one thing with it, along with Blind Pig, is that they still carry a really firm bitterness. And that's something where, with the home modern hazy IPA and in general the kind of the modern West Coast IPA where BUs have dropped and they're more mimicking a hazy IPA. Pliny and Pig have really always kept, especially Pliny, it really has a firm bitterness. It's an unapologetic bitterness, but it's a clean bitterness. And to me, that's a cornerstone of that beer. And in general, to me, it's a profile of IPA that's what keeps you drinking more. It's just like a good Pilsner. A good Pilsner is going to have a really crisp bitterness to it, and that's a classic part of Pilsner, because it what makes you want to drink a little bit more. Yeah,
I think when we think of Pilsner, you think light, but it's 40 to 50 IBUs, right?
It's normal, yeah.
Normal with the style guidelines.
This whole thing of Pilsners being in the 20s and 30s. We have a friend who's a retired hop scientist for Anheuser-Busch, and he always talks about, I love STS because it reminds me of, from a bitterness standpoint, of what Pilsners used to be like in Germany back when, 20, 30 years ago, when I used to go to Germany to buy hops early on for Anheuser-Busch. And I hear that a lot from old timers about that. And so I personally, I know we'll get to STS in a minute, but it's just like a Pilsner. I think, an IPA in general, they've become a little too soft and too flabby, and that's what I like about ours. And in general, when I have a hazy IPA, and the part I love the aroma, I love the flavor, that juicy, unctuous, fruity notes, but it's the finish that normally is a little disappointing to me on a lot of hazy IPAs, because they're just not bitter or dry enough. And that's just how I like to drink beer.
It doesn't make you want to just keep having another sip. Back to Pliny. The origin story is pretty cool. We just last year did the Double IPA Fest, the Bistro, Vic. So tell the story, and you kind of did in your other video, but I'd like to share it here as well. So we went to the Double IPA Fest, kind of documented that. So we've got a video out there, everybody who wants to check that out. But I think you were asked to create this beer?
So we were already selling beer to the Bistro. They were an account of ours. In fact, I delivered there most of the beer at that point. And Vic and Cynthia decided that they wanted to have an IPA festival, and then eventually a double IPA festival. And so he went to a handful of brewers and kind of pitched this idea, and he knew that I had already made a double IPA at Blind Pig. And so this is while we were at Korbel. And so he says, hey, do you want to create a beer for this? And I was like, yeah. So we also had hit up Marin Brewing, Moylan's, Stone had a double IPA, and then Rogue had something called I Squared, and then Berry Public. Those were the original.
I was going to ask you, who were the breweries that were
I think that was everyone. I think I got everyone. And so we created a recipe, and we needed a name. And so we were first thinking about something that had to do with like big flavors, like a double IPA would be, and something like Mammoth. It wasn't Mammoth because that was already taken, Mammoth Brewing Company. And then we started thinking about, we couldn't come up with anything good. And we tried to start thinking about large bottles, like large wine bottles, Methuselah, Nebuchadnezzar, which are all like Greek gods or whatever. And cool, but not quite it. We wanted a name that would take on its own personality. And we started looking through this old beer dictionary we had that the Brewers Association had published. And we looked up hops, and then hops referenced Humulus lupulus, the botanical name. And then that referenced Lupus saluterius, which is the original botanical name for hops, and in there it referenced Pliny the Elder, or Pliny the Elder is the proper way to say it. And so we looked him up, and it turns out that he and his contemporaries had written about hops, and were, if not the first, some of the early people to write about hops. And Pliny was known for, he wrote the very first encyclopedia called the Natural History. It was a 5-set book on a lot of botanical stuff. He died at the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, so a lot of what we know about Vesuvius was through him and his writings, but it was his nephew and adopted son, Pliny the Younger.
There's the Younger.
And there's the reference and the crossover that we know a lot about Pliny the Elder. So anyways, that's where the name came from, because he wrote about hops. And so that it seemed like an odd name for a beer, but it sure, and it didn't take off initially. It was a very slow burn. So eventually where it became popular. And 2008, 2010 is when Pliny the Elder took off, and it was 2010 for Younger.
Yeah, that's about the time I was getting really into beer, so that resonates well, yeah. Well, awesome beer. Look forward to sharing this recipe with everybody, and be well. All right, Vinnie, let's talk about Pliny the Younger now. We talked about Elder, so Younger, we know where the name came from. Where'd this concept for this beer and the event itself, I think that's really, having gone to it several times, and one thing I want to say to you again is, like, every time I come, you and Natalie are walking the line and shaking everybody's hand. I mean, that is the coolest thing. I can't think of anything better, just more of a class act. You guys are amazing.
We like doing it. So so we, in 2005, we had now taken over the brewery from Corbel. We were downtown in Santa Rosa. It was Natalie and I, and it was pretty slow. We weren't paying ourselves, and slow time of winter for beer. So we were just looking for ways to fill the tanks, make a little extra beer, a little extra, income. And at the time, breweries would make barley wines in the winter, and that was all well and good. But I had this idea to push the envelope and see how hoppy we could make a beer, and still have it drinkable, balanced, but a lot of hops, way more hops than the Elder. And at that point, Elder was a year-round beer. And so first was like, well, do you make it lower in alcohol or higher in alcohol? Lower in alcohol, the hops will pop more, but it becomes way too out of balance and maybe too chlorophyll-y and too green. So the decision was to make a bigger beer. At the time, it started at 11% alcohol. Eventually, it moved. We brought it down to 10 1/4, which is where it is now. And but it was a higher alcohol beer, so basically just more base malt and then more sugar. So that was that part of the recipe. And then literally taking the hops and adding 50 or 100% more than the Elder is, and building this beer, like, how can you make it be drinkable, not too sweet, because you have to remember alcohol adds sweetness. And that was in part why we eventually brought it to 10 1/4, but also have a beer that's really dry. Then that was, that's a cornerstone of all of our beers, was that they are dry. And that was the beginning of it. And so for the first 5 years, from 2005 to 2009, we would release it in early February with no fanfare, nobody waiting in line. And then in 2010, I showed up to tap the tank or keg, whatever it was. It's the first Friday of February. And lo and behold, it's 7 in the morning too, by the way, so we're 4 hours from opening. And I look outside and there's people mingling out front, so I get the beer tapped and I look out and there's even more people out front. So I go outside and say, hey, what's going on? They said, oh, well, we're here for Pliny the Younger. And I said, well, it's 7 a.m., we don't open until 11. And they said, yeah, that's fine, we want to taste it. There's a website that has it ranked as best beer in the world. Another website has it as like the second best beer. Rate Beer had it as number 1, and Beer Advocate had it, I think, as number 2 under West Flutter behind West Flutter 12. And we only sold it on draft at our little brew pub in Santa Rosa. That was it. But somewhere along the way, people were coming in, drinking it, and it was somehow getting rating. I didn't even know what Beer Advocate or Rate Beer was at the time. I literally would be like, where was it? Who? What's Beer Advocate? What's Rate Beer? Anyways, that day we sold all 620 gallons in 8 hours.
And how many years before?
That was 5 years.
5 years into it.
5 years for it to build up to that.
Slow, and then catalyst,
and
boom.
then, and literally that day was literally, and I mean, I drilled a hole in the cold box in the back. So we were selling growlers of it too.
Yeah.
And like literally put a tap in the back of the cold box and was filling growlers, and Natalie was at the front, and a couple bartenders and any employees that came in, just put them to work. Friends that came in, put them to work. And we were able to buy a 200 barrel fermenter because of that day, but it was one of our worst days because it was the worst customer service.
Yeah.
But literally that day was when we started. That's when the event built from that day. Was that okay? Next year we're going to spread it out over 2 weeks, and we're going to have a limit. And we may run out at the end of the day, but you'll know for sure you can come back the next day and get it.
And you guys stopped doing growler fills at one point?
Yeah,
too,
that
right?
was, we only did growler fills.
Was it that 1 year?
Well, up until 2010. We did growlers the 5 years
Because I remember seeing
before.
like on the internet, people were selling them.
They were
and it was,
selling them.
it
It was crazy. Yeah, so from 2005 to 10, you could buy growlers of it, and then no more growlers. So from 2011 until 19, so through 18, it was draft only, and it was in 19 that we started doing bottles, when we opened here in Windsor. But we didn't do, so this was draft only, and people would show up in the most inclement weather. It would be raining, and
I've been out here one time when it was raining.
Yeah, so we stretched it out over 2 weeks, and we every year got a little better and changes. So eventually a wristband, eventually a limit of 3 glasses, a table limit, pull tabs on your wristband, and just trying to make the experience better. And I think, you know, as I talked about earlier, that I look at our beer recipes as a concept, and that they're evolving, and that it keeps them relevant. I think the Pliny the Younger event has stayed relevant, and that, you know, there's almost nothing like it, that for 2 weeks in a year that a brewery has a line for that whole 2 weeks for a special release, and now 2 locations. And our staff knows how important it is, and so just all in, it's become this this really great gathering of beer enthusiasts and folks that are just into maybe not even like hardcore beer enthusiasts like you and I are.
Yeah.
Just people that love the experience of it. And so we, you know, it's now 20 years just passed, so we did a special commemorative label and did 3 bottles instead of 2. But even like switching from no bottles into doing bottles, making bottles available at 2 per person in 19, that was a part of that growth and the evolution of the Pliny the Younger release. And you know, we talked originally about potentially including it in, you know, the
BYR article.
But the recipe changes every year, but there's also some advanced hop products in it that I'm pretty sure homebrewers can't get. So, you know, I think we'll leave it up to the imagination of the homebrewers. It's now just 2-row malts. There's Pilsner malt as well in the base. It's a good amount of sugar. That gets you to 10.25% alcohol. It finishes at about 2.5 Plato still, even though it's so high gravity. Sometimes it gets a little drier. You know, it's bittered with hop extract, a lot of pellets, whole cone hops as well. And then dry hops, it works out to be like 7 pounds per barrel of just dry hops.
So nice, healthy dry hop.
It's a huge dry hop load, but you know.
And that's just the T90
That's T90 equivalent. Some of that's cryo.
So there is
there.
some extra. Okay.
So it's probably all in with a concentrated hop pellet and T90s. We're probably at 5 pounds per barrel though, and any more is unnecessary.
Yeah.
Any less, you don't get that huge impact.
There is like a law of diminishing returns at some point, right?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Back to the event itself. Like I always, the lines are amazing. And talking to beer people, I always meet someone from out of country. Like last year, or this recent one, someone from Thailand I was talking to, someone from Australia. I think the year before that. I'm always meeting people.
Yeah.
So it brings people from
all over the
cult
world.
following.
Yeah. And there's an economic impact study done most years, and in 2024, so earlier this year, the economic impact to Sonoma County was $8.6 million.
Wow.
The year before that, it was 6.3 million or 4 million. So from somewhere in the 6 million range for 2-week economic impact to 8.6 million is pretty.
That's
pretty
awesome,
staggering. Yeah, it's very flattering.
I would encourage anyone out there to make the trip. It's just a great experience,
yeah.
great fun.
Yeah. And we make it more of a Russian River experience. So like, there's always some other unique beer on. We had Pliny for President available this year. I usually have some special funky beer on. We pull old bottles out of our reserve library and have them available as well. So it's more than just about Younger.
All right, so the next one, this is one of my favorite beers, but it's my wife's favorite beer. Yeah. So I had to ask you for this recipe. So anybody who's going to check out the BYO article, Happy Hops, tell me how this came to be and a little bit about it.
Yeah, so Happy Hops originally was a beer that we used to test an all Mosaic beer. And it was before Mosaic was even named. It was HBC 369. And I was lucky enough to be, if not the first, one of the first brewers to use Mosaic, or HBC 369. I remember Jason Peralt sending me a bale. Jason's the one that bred the hop originally, and we used it. This was in Santa Rosa, and it made this just amazing, beautiful, fruity, blueberry, tropical notes, and I knew this hop was going to be something. I remember the first time, like, oh my God, this is crazy. So anyways, eventually the beer turned into the recipe it is now, which I call a progressive IPA, and what I mean by that is it's got more of that hazy IPA tendency, but it is a clear beer in a West Coast style. It's not quite as bitter as Blind Pig or Pliny is, but it still does have enough bitterness to carry a firm, finish on the beer. And it's using all, not all, but mostly New World hop varieties that are more fruit driven and that tropical, still some stone fruit and that sort of thing. So it's mostly focused on 3 hop varieties, although there are some other ones to back it up, which we'll include in the recipe. But the 3 main varieties are Azacca, Strata, and Mosaic.
Love Strata,
and those are all hops that have more of that big fruity quality to it. And it's 6.5% alcohol, so it's still pretty manageable. The malt bill is some two-row, some wheat malt, and
some wheat malt.
And that's kind of something I used to do in the old days, and now we're doing it more, kind of bringing wheat back into it to carry a little bit of body and mouth feel. Doesn't hurt for the head retention as well. But it's just this really easy drinking, but really over-the-top hop. I love opening it and pouring it into a glass, and you just get like that huge whiff of tropical stone fruit from the hops. The name itself, Happy Hops, is an old brand from an old brewery here in Santa Rosa called Grace Brothers Brewery, and Happy Hops was one of their brands.
Did it have that kind of face? And
so that's their
1950s,
logo. So
I think.
We were able to trademark it. We asked the family; they were cool with it, even though they didn't really have any. It wasn't theirs per se. It was just hanging out there. But we trademarked it, and so now we own the Happy Hops. And if you're ever in our pub in Santa Rosa, there's a big giant metal Happy Hop sign hanging on the east concrete wall. That's the original Happy Hop sign that used to hang outside of the Grace Brothers Brewery. It was inside between the G and the B of Grace Brothers, so kind of a historical reference. Velvet Glow, our Hellas, that's also an old Grace Brothers brand.
Oh, really? Okay.
As well. So, anyways, we jokingly call her a not so hazy IPA. So it has the tendencies of a hazy IPA, but it's clear, crisp. Even recently, we're talking about how our recipes change. Recently, I just kept drinking it going, it's great, but it still just needs a little bit of bitterness, a little more bitterness, but it needed more. It's typically bittered with Warrior, which is really clean. And so I took some, I said, hey, on the next batch, let's throw a couple pounds of Brewer's Gold in. At the beginning of the boil, and Brewer's Gold has a little more of a coarse bitterness. So I think sometimes as brewers, home brewers or professional brewers, we can get too focused on too clean of a bitterness. Sometimes you want a little more of a coarse bitterness to kind of ruffle up your palate.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I didn't know Strata was in here. That's
there's
really
a lot of
cool.
Strata in it.
I love Strata.
I think there's more Strata than there is Mosaic.
Oh, wow, okay. Indie Hops is the one who developed that.
Which we get them direct from them.
We talked about it earlier, a lot of this lineage. That one, I think Pearl is the lineage
I don't remember
for Strata.
I don't remember the lineage for Strata.
But it's cool, it reminded me of that. Well, I've done hop selection with them and learning this came from Pearl. I didn't, it's kind of an interesting one, but I love that hop. Strata's amazing. All right, the next one, STS Pils. You know, love a great Pilsner. This is actually a Keller beer, right? So,
yep.
Which just means fresh, kind of
unfiltered, yeah, a little cloudy. Of course, when it's in a can or bottle, the yeast is gonna settle out. So if you read the side of it, the can, it might say if you want, you don't have to. In truth, it would be considered an Italian style Pils. Because it is dry hopped with European hops.
Yeah.
Our friend Agostino from Birrificio Italiano in northern Italy came up with the Italian style Pils with the idea that he wanted a Pilsner that just had a little bit more aroma, so he dry hopped it with some noble hops that he was using. So different than what we call now West Coast Pils, which would be a Pilsner but brewed with like IPA or New Zealand hops. And so yeah, it would. But from a marketing standpoint, 99.99% of the world isn't even going to know what an Italian Pils is. Too hard to. So Keller Pils, and even if you look at it, it doesn't say Keller Pils anywhere.
Just Pils,
it's just Pils, and we leave the Keller Pils to the side label. Call it good. But yeah, so that is all. It's surprising. Most people, it surprises them. But we use all Dingemann's Pilsner malt. Is the malt in
there's definitely a good malt background to this,
and that's why I love Dingemann's malt. Dingemann's malt does not get bantered around enough amongst homebrewers and commercial brewers alike. But I think it's one of the most amazing malt companies. Multi-generation, family-run still. Carl Dingemann's, we work with him through a brewer supply group. So that's the malt in it. And then also surprise to most people is that most of the hop in this is a French hop called Aramis. And so there is a little bit of middle fruit in it, Hallertau middle fruit. And sometimes we'll use tradition for bittering, but like 90% of the hop bill is Aramis. And Aramis was a French hop bred from Strisselspalt for Anheuser-Busch. And when InBev took over AB, they decided they didn't want to use Aramis, and it had been planted. So the French hop growers went to their American counterpart, Val Peacock, who was a part of our hop quality group. He had already left Anheuser-Busch, retired, and basically the way the story goes is the French hop growers said, well, you told us to plant it, so help us sell us if you wouldn't. So he just started hitting craft breweries, and I met Val through the hop quality group, and I was starting to make a Pilsner, and he talked about Aramis, and I'd had one beer with it before, and I was like, that's a really cool hop. And so we just wanted to be different and differentiate our Pilsner from others. There aren't a lot out there in the craft world. This is 2014 when we started making STS. And so now it's a year-round beer. It's our number 3 top-selling beer, just behind Pliny and Blind Pig. We make STS Pils almost every week now. And,
that's great to hear. You always hear every year, the lager's coming back, but to hear it actually selling well too, that's amazing.
It's selling really well. It's dry hopped at 0.2 to 0.25 pounds per barrel, so it's a really low,
very low,
low dry hop, and we dry hop it cold compared to our IPAs, which we
when you say cold, what temperature?
42.
Oh, that is pretty cold. Okay, yeah.
So we don't
which
want
leads
too
to a different
much.
flavor, right?
Yeah, we don't want too much. We've tried to dry hop it warmer, and it was just too green. Those European hops. So it works really well, and that's also why we bring the dry hop load down and the temperature down. So
that's interesting. Looking forward to brewing this one, and you sharing the recipe with us. So
and it's a little more of a complex recipe, step mash and that sort of thing.
Okay.
But you know what though, it doesn't have to be.
I think we'll share exactly how you guys do it, and then if they want to change it up.
The one thing John Palmer's book didn't have was a kitschy phrase like Charlie had, relax, don't worry.
Yeah, relax, don't worry, have another homebrew.
So I still say that, if you do a single infusion, I've had plenty of great lagers that were made,
especially with the highly modified malts of today.
Exactly, like we get our Dingemann's Pilsner malt. It's kind of malted for us, so it's a little under modified, and it's what we want. We want it to be under modified so that we can control the mashing process. But for the average malt that you get, it's pretty highly modified. A single infusion will do the trick, or at least get you close.
Awesome. And the name real quick, so it's the local airport, STS, the Charles Schultz, which who doesn't know Peanuts, right?
Yeah. So our local airport, which is about a mile from us, is the airport code is STS, just like San Francisco's SFO, so on and so forth. And so we were looking for a name. I had already brewed the first batch, and we didn't have a name for it yet. And this was in 2014, and Natalie and I were flying to LA from STS, and we were landing at LAX. We were given an award for hospitality or something, and so we landed at LAX, and so there's a big digital readout when you land at the gates. This is a pretty small plane, and so you'd have to get out off the plane onto the tarmac and then go back into the building. And it had the airport code where you came from, and it said STS. And we were looking out as we were pulling in, and I'm like, Natalie, that's it. That's the name. Because I wanted it to be something local. I wanted to name the beer something local. And so I literally emailed our trademark attorney. I'm like, I need you to look up STS. Is there a trademark for this in beer? Because I was pretty excited. We were having a really hard time coming up with a name. And so anyways, it became STS.
That's a cool name. A cool story behind it. All right, so let's move on to one of my favorite, Belgian beers and Consecration. So MoreBeer has a kit for this beer. Let's talk a little bit about this beer and what inspired it. It's got fruit in there as well.
Yeah, it's got dried currants in it. The currants that are more like the raisin type that you buy in the store, so they're super easy to get. So, but yeah, this was the third in the line of our family of beers that had specific barrels tied to the beer. So Temptation is a blonde ale and Chardonnay barrels. Supplication's a brownish red ale in Pinot Noir barrels with dried cherries. And Consecration is a dark ale in Cabernet Sauvignon barrels with currants. Common thread between all of them is Brettanomyces, Lactobacillus, and Pediococcus. And so for this one, I wanted to do something dark that blended, melded well with the flavors you get out of a cab, so like berry fruit, tobacco, chocolate, that sort of thing. And so there's some dark malts in it. There's it's a warm fermentation to kind of get more ester profile. And then something we do with all of our barrel-aged beers is we mash at a high temperature to have unfermentable sugars, and we usually underpitch the yeast by 50% so that it kind of stalls out. Essentially, you want to make a beer that doesn't taste that good to begin with, because you want to have it be really sweet.
Before the bacteria starts to work.
The Brett goes to work, and then after that we add the bacteria, and it goes to work, and then along the way we've added the fruit. In this case, it was the dried currants, and it goes into Cabernet barrels. This is all American oak. We're very lucky, and I feel privileged to be able to get barrels from Silver Oak, one of the most iconic and best wine Cabernets made in America. And it's all American oak. I used to not say which winery it was, but then we did a collaboration with Silver Oak
Cat was out of the bag then.
For their anniversary. So I think it was our 50th anniversary. Yeah, Cat was out of the bag at that point. We went public there. So anyways, I love that it's got this rich fullness, and it's chocolate, tobacco, berry fruit, and the currants is definitely contributes. But at the same time, if you have never tasted the beer, which most people never have tasted, a version of it without the currants, you actually don't know that the currants are in there. We on occasion will do a barrel of it without currants if we're going to do like a special tasting, kind of like that private the barrel funky tours that we used to do before the pandemic. And sometimes I would pour people Supplication without fruit or Consecration without fruit, and that was the only time we've never packaged it.
And it was hard to tell the difference.
You can tell the difference there, but to taste it now and say, oh, it has fruit in it, it just tastes like it's just melded into the overall flavor.
It's very subtle.
And it's subtle, and it's just a part of it. And that was our thing with Supplication, which has cherries. We didn't want it to be a creek. We just wanted the cherries to be a part of the overall balance of the beer, and the tannins and the oak and that sort of thing. And so it's 10% alcohol, so it is higher in alcohol. That was done on purpose to also get a little bit of sweetness from the alcohol. I mentioned it earlier, but sweetness is a flavor, and from alcohol is what I mean. Is trying to say there, and so it's good to always keep that in mind, whether it's this beer or any beer.
And you know what I really love about this and the Belgian beers? I think they kind of blend the lines between wine and beer.
Yeah.
So often I'll teach people, I don't like beer. And I'm like, no, let's try a Creek or try, something like this. People that might like wine. And it's really, kind of blending those lines.
Yeah, blurs the lines between wine and beer. And now we're doing it even more because we're making grape beers.
Like the Italian ales, grape,
Yeah, and but this is definitely kind of getting in that direction. And one thing I'll finish with is that, back when funky beers have slowed down quite a bit, but back in the early days of us doing these beers, temptation, supplication, and consecration, and then we have beatification, which is spontaneous fermented, but we kept making the same 4 beers year in and year out. We really tried to build brands around these, just like we have with Blind Pig and Pliny and STS, and we didn't want to just jump around. And so it was really important to us to hone in on a craft. And by brewing them over and over again, we got pretty close to making the same beer every time. We got the same barrels. Yes, the malt and hops changed, but in general, because it wasn't just a one-off, we've been able to recreate these beers, and they're pretty darn consistent now, even though there's a lot of variabilities out there.
Yeah, I'll frequently with the club we'll do verticals and try out the different years, and it's very hard to tell the difference.
And the one caveat there is that the one change that does happen is some years it will be all new barrels from silver oak. So the oak character might be more. Our goal is to always have a third first use, a third second use, and a third use. Sometimes we'll have fourth use barrels but maybe then it's 25% of the 4. But sometimes it doesn't work out, and it ends up being mostly new barrels. Those you can tell the difference, and there's more tannin, but those age better too.
Yeah.
So
back to the name and the branding, they all kind of have a similar name, and with the Cation, where did that come from? The Asian.
The Shun beers. It was started with Damnation, which was our first. That was a Belgian.
That's got the pitchfork, right, or the?
That's got a trident.
Trident. That's what it is.
And, I had already brewed that beer. This was back in the Corbel days. We had an old homebrew system that winemakers used to use there to make beer, and I had developed this golden ale. I was a huge fan of Duvel, and still a huge fan of Duvel. And that was the inspiration for Damnation, but didn't have a name and wanted to have something that was kind of devilish, diabolical, kind of in that Duvel vein. And I was driving home. So the recipe was done. I had it for over a year. Driving home, time Natalie and I lived in Healdsburg, and making the turn on the old Redwood Highway to get home off of East Side Road, and a song from Squirrel Nut Zipper, the swing band, came on. It's called Hell, and in the middle of it, twice they spelled damnation. They spell the D and the A and the M and an N, A-T-I-O-N. They do it again, and it spells damnation. I heard it, I was like, that's it.
That's where it came from. Okay.
So then by the time I got home, another 5 minutes less, I was like, well, if there's damnation, you got to have redemption. And at the time, there was no one to call. There was no books on making funky beer. Back in the day, there was a website called the Burgundian Babel Belt that was all funky sour beer related. It doesn't exist anymore. There wasn't Milk the Funk like there is now, which was amazing. And there was almost nobody making these beers. New Belgium had La Folie, and then Tommy Arthur, who has Lost Abbey down in San Diego now, he was making these beers when he was a brewer at Pizza Port. So Tommy and I shared everything. So I called him with this thing. I said, hey, I came up with a name finally for these. And shortly thereafter, he's like, well, if you have damnation and redemption, you have to have salvation and let's see. I said, if you're going to have, I have damnation and I came up with redemption. And he says, well, if you have those two, you have to have salvation and temptation. So salvation was a dark Belgian that we do, and then temptation was our first sour funky. So that's just one key point on these funky beers, is that sharing of information that Tommy and I had. There was nobody making these beers other than Peter Buchart that we knew of, and so it was anything we could do to learn stuff, but then be like, hey, this worked for me. Oh, this didn't work, and
I'm glad you mentioned that. It's one thing that really attracted me to the craft beer industry is the sharing of information, ingredients. Like when I had a brewery, I'd buy from other breweries in the area hops, like because they were getting selection. So I was able to, but that willingness to help out others who you'd be considered competition maybe or things like that. I love that. So that's great to hear that.
Sam Calagione said when he gave the keynote to craft beer industry years ago, the craft beer industry is 99% asshole free.
Yeah, I believe it. I've seen that over the years. Before we move on this one, we'll obviously share the recipe. But one of the cool things that I learned coming to work for MoreBeer is they actually get chunks of Consecration barrel. Or they get a barrel or two and they chop it up.
And they cut them up into chunks. I guess they still do that.
Yeah, they still do that. So I know. So how'd that come about, or is that?
I think it was just developing the recipe because as a home brewer, you're not going to be able to get a cab barrel.
Yeah.
So one way you could cheat as a home brewer, and it would be illegal. It wouldn't be legal for me to do it.
Oh, soak some.
Soak some oak, or even just put a
little cab in there.
But the oak's more fun.
Yeah. That's really cool. So awesome. All right, so coming off of the Belgian beers, we just talked about Consecration. One of the coolest things, pun intended, the Coolship. Tell me a little bit about that, and lambic making and why you're doing that. I mean, it's amazing to see that here. Yeah.
So another part of our funky beer production is spontaneous beer. I've been to Belgium probably a dozen plus times, and my first trip I was 19 years old. Went to Cantillon, was really just blown away that you could make beer that way. Years later, took another trip with some brewer friends, came back very inspired to make spontaneous beer. That was in 2005, I believe, and started doing it at our Santa Rosa pub, just in an old Grundy that I took the lid off. Eventually put in a Coolship there, a little different shape than what you'd see now at our Windsor Brewery or anywhere in Belgium, but started spontaneously fermenting, and there's not a big story behind it other than just the magic of it. And there's a lot of science behind it, and if you do the same thing year in and year out, you can really hone in the process and get some consistency. But I love the blending aspect of it. It's got a very winemaking side of that. And so we now have a Coolship here at our Windsor facility also, which is more of a traditional Coolship. So, the air comes in and cools the wort off. It's a very shallow vessel. This is, I think, 20 or 25 feet square.
Real shallow.
And really shallow, only like 10, 12 inches of wort in it. And then the cool air comes in, cools it off, and then inoculates the wort. It eventually goes into the barrels. In time, it'll start fermenting and could age up to 3 years. And then we'll do a disproportionate blend of different years of what we call synambic. Synambic is Sonoma and Lambic contracted together, because Lambics
outside of there.
Lambics are protected
the
term,
Sen Valley,
and it's also out of respect for our brewer friends. And that makes a beer called Beatification, which is 100% spontaneous fermented. So it's just another arm of our funky program.
So that's like a goose kind of then?
Yeah, it would be considered similar to a goose, where synambic would be our lambic, singular beers, and then lambics are blended together to make goose.
Yeah. That's awesome. Keeping on that open fermenters, let's talk to that, because you've got, for your clean beers, open top fermenters, which is pretty.
We do.
Yeah. Pretty cool. I mean, enclosed room and such.
Yeah, it's not as wild.
Yeah.
It's a controlled environment. We even have a little open top fermenter in our pilot brewery, our 5-barrel pilot brewery. That's a miniature of our big guys. We have 6 open top fermenters in the main brewery, and then the one in the pilot brewery. The ones in the big brewery have yeast collectors as well, so you can naturally top crop. The krausen will go out the side door, down a slide, and into a yeast collector that's set into the floor, which we could take that and either just dump it or reuse it. Right now we don't reuse it yet, but it's a goal to eventually skim and take that and propagate from it. Open top fermenters traditionally are 1-to-1 ratio, so their tank geometry is that they're as wide as they are tall.
Okay.
So there's a lot less head pressure on the beer, even so there's no lid, so there's no head pressure there. But even just the weight of the
water
beer,
column.
Yeah, just the column of the weight of the liquid creates pressure. So the fact that they're 1-to-1 ratio, you have very little pressure there. The yeast ferments; it's a lot healthier. Viability is usually quite a bit higher. There's a lot of positives to open top fermentation. The yeast, through a high krausen, tends to have this convection effect, in fermentation. If you're a home brewer, you've seen it in the carboy.
Yep.
So through that, you have your foam at the top, your krausen, and then in that krausen, you have what the Germans call the Brauhefe. It's basically like just a mix of dead yeast cells, of polyphenols, of maybe trub that got through the heat exchanger, and that'll get trapped in the foam. And to me, this is the best reason to open top ferment, is that you can go in and skim that. And so by skimming that, you're skimming off some like harsh flavors and whatnot, particularly in lager beer.
Yeah.
That if you can open top ferment, or you can somehow get rid of that stuff, you'll end up with a cleaner beer all the way around. There's a lot of advantages for ester. You'll
promoting esters.
You can control esters more in open top fermentation, but yeah, you're promoting esters, which isn't a bad thing even for lagers and whatnot, because you're also now at lower temperature. Belgian beers are just amazing.
Yeah, you want those.
As a home brewer, you can mimic a open top fermenter by filling your fermenter half full.
Oh, okay.
Like even
leaving headspace.
Yeah, even if you're old school, I'm just going to use carboys because it's simple to imagine. If you're making a 5-gallon batch, instead of fermenting it in one carboy, split it between two. Now you're at a 1-to-1 ratio approximately.
Okay.
And then once the fermentation starts, just pop the fermentation lock off and put a piece of cheesecloth over, and now you're open top fermenting.
That's interesting. There's so much talk about like pressure fermentation right now. Everybody's getting into that.
That will help suppress
esters, suppress fusuls, things like that.
But you can also suppress. You also get a cleaner beer though through an open top fermentation, because as the CO2 doesn't have as far to basically scrub the beer.
Gotcha.
And so it's going through, and you're escaping quicker, and so you're blowing off more of the fermentation byproducts more easily, whereas opposed to a tall, skinny tank where the CO2 takes a long way to travel through, and in the end it may not scrub everything out. With that said, you can still make amazing beer in closed top.
Disadvantages.
This is a nice to have, not a need to have as a brewer. But we love it as a tool in our toolkit.
Yeah, that's really cool, and it's awesome to see that.
Yeah. It's a great way to tell the story of beer too, and it's on our tour that you can see the beer fermenting. We have the rooms, as you know, set low.
Yeah.
So being John Malkovich floor, because it's at floor 1.5.
That's a good reference. I love that.
So you can look down and see the beer fermenting. So and we love it for that.
All right, Vinnie, this one I want to talk to you about hop creep. I remember you did a talk for Doze a while ago, really open to, you guys have done a lot of studies on it.
Yeah, so hop creep is basically a secondary fermentation that's caused by the enzymes that we now know are in the hops. And so they're eating the long chain sugars that are left in the beer after you've dry hopped the beer. And hops also have a little bit of sugar in them, so you'll always see a little bump up after you dry hop of sugar, but those enzymes will break down the long chain sugars also in the beer. And then the yeast that was dormant in the beer now wakes up because there's now a simple fresh sugar source, and they'll start fermenting, and that's going to cause your beer to dry out. Alcohol's going to potentially be higher. The biggest, from commercial brewing and home brewing too, it could be a safety issue if you package your beer too soon. You've got bottles or cans that are overcarbonated. So even if it's in a keg, you're pouring, it's foamy. But one of the biggest issues is the diacetyl that's being created from that secondary fermentation. And so, we've done a lot of work on it, given countless presentations on it, similar to the one that I did with Doze, and more recent ones on Brewing Network and other places. And so, the things that you can do to, you're never going to get rid of it, not yet at least. We don't have a way to totally get rid of it. But, on a commercial level, we're selecting hops that we know don't have a lot of hop seeds in them. Seeds carry a lot of enzymes.
Oh, okay.
And hops shouldn't have a lot of seeds in them, but sometimes it happens. So the hops, when you buy them at a homebrew shop, you're not going to know because they're in pellet form most of the time. So those hops get ran through a hammer mill. It is what it is. But as a professional, that's one of the things we do. Another thing we do is we are making a much healthier yeast nutrient. So we're using zinc as our yeast nutrient dose, and we're doing it on the cold side. So most breweries add their zinc or in the whirlpool.
Yeah, in the
and
kettle.
this is not things like Cervomyces or yeast X nutrient. Those do get added on the hot side to get mixed in and whatnot. But like our take is that all you need is zinc.
Yep.
And so you add the zinc, but a lot of it gets bound up in the trube. So we add it on the cold side. Your malt gives you a little bit, and but a little bit of zinc contribution. But to give you an idea of the volume, like we're adding 0.8 to 0.9 grams, so very small amount, to 6.5 barrels of wort in the pilot brewery. So it's a tiny amount of zinc.
You don't need much.
But that has given us better yeast health. It makes the yeast more readily, or puts it in a better position to mop up the diacetyl that the hop creep is creating. And then finally, we're now making pH adjustments to the beer when we dry hop. So when we, just before we dry hop.
Because usually you'll see the pH bump up.
When you dry hop, you're going to see your pH go up 0.1 to 0.14 on the pH scale per pound per barrel. So if you're dry hopping at 2 pounds per barrel, your pH may go up 0.2 to 0.28. 3 pounds per barrel might be 0.3 or more. We've tasted other breweries finished beers that are over 5 pH. Technical legal limit is 4.6.
Yeah, to be for food safety laws.
Yeah. So anyways, so by lowering your pH, not only do you stay within that good food safety realm, but the yeast will more readily be able to mop up the diacetyl, because the higher the pH, the yeast has a more difficult time cleaning it up. And at some point, you're going to hit a point where it can't mop it up. And all you can do is just dump in ALDC, which is really expensive.
Yeah,
ALDC
not
being
cheap,
the enzyme that your hop creep will still happen, but it basically
brings it below our threshold, right?
Exactly.
Tasteable threshold.
And but so we find that by lowering the pH at dry hop, that we now put the yeast in a better position to mop up the diacetyl. Even though the pH goes up, it still goes up to a level that's still within the range.
Gotcha. Okay, so you're getting at it. With phosphoric acid? Or
yeah, we use phosphoric acid, but it could be food-grade lactic acid as well, whatever your preference is.
Okay. The phosphoric's more neutral, so that's probably why you're using
that's why
that.
we like it.
Yeah, lactic's got that little tart to it.
Yeah.
All right, well, Vinnie, thanks again for having me. This has been amazing. Love coming here. Love the hospitality. Thank you for everything you shared.
Of course.
Everybody who's watched this, be sure to check out the BYO article where we're going to share, Vinnie's going to share these 5 recipes and how to brew them, all the tips for brewing them.
Good. Thanks.
All right, hey,
Appreciate
thanks, man.
it.
Yeah,
thanks.
nice seeing you again.
Seeing you.
Yeah.
Always. Thank you.
Yep.